A warm summer evening turned into a nightmare. Two girls were found dead on the edge of a park, their bodies lying in the grass with obvious signs of brutal violence. The blow to the small town was devastating. Routine walks became a reminder of the fragility of human life. The victims, two young women, Sarah Miller and Emily Harris, lived in a small American town where life flowed smoothly and predictably. Sarah, an 18-year-old high school senior, was preparing for college, was passionate about photography, and dreamed of a career as a journalist. Emily, her childhood friend, a year older, worked part-time at a local cafe while saving up for their own place. Their friendship was evident to everyone. The girls rarely parted, spent evenings together, and often strolled along familiar streets. That day, July 14th, the heat was gradually waning toward evening. Around 7 o'clock, the girls met near Sarah's house for a walk in the nearby park. This was a familiar route. They often strolled along the forest path, engaging in long conversations and discussing future plans. To family and friends, it seemed like a perfectly normal evening, without any warning signs. The last people to see the girls alive were neighbors. One man recalled spotting them turning the corner near a grocery store. He noted that they were both laughing, appeared carefree, and seemed to feel safe. He said he didn't notice anything suspicious nearby. The street was deserted, and cars were rare. The exact time of their departure is known, 7:15 p.m. Sarah left her phone at home charging, while Emily took hers, but its signal was later lost. This circumstance later became a key detail in the investigation. The girls were supposed to be home by 8 o'clock that evening, but they didn't. Sarah's parents immediately sensed something was wrong. She rarely stayed out without warning, especially in the summer when it got dark late, but discipline in the family remained strict. Attempts to reach Emily were unsuccessful. Her phone was out of range. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, the alarm grew. The parents called the girls' friends and acquaintances, but no one had seen them since they went for a walk. Initially, they assumed the girls had gone to visit someone or had lingered by the lake. However, the lack of any messages or calls seemed unusual. Around 10 p.m., the families decided to contact the police. A missing persons report for the two young girls was filed immediately. Such cases were rare for local law enforcement, so the police took the information seriously. By midnight, several police patrols had already left to check the area around the park where they were last seen. Meanwhile, relatives launched their own search. They were joined by neighbors, classmates, and Emily's co-workers. With flashlights and cars, they combed the streets, entered empty buildings, and called the girls by name. With each passing minute, it became clearer. The situation was more than just a simple tardiness. The first night of the search could be called chaotic, but it was precisely this that marked the starting point of a tragic story. Back then, no one suspected that by morning their city would awaken to news that would change everything. The next morning began with uneasy silence. Sarah and Emily hadn't returned home. The parents spent the night awake, calling friends, checking their phones, and checking social media. With each passing hour, the hope that the girls might simply have been delayed faded. In a small town, people were accustomed to trusting each other and rarely encountered situations where teenagers disappeared without a trace. At 7 in the morning, the parents contacted the police again. The officers on duty were already aware of the report filed the previous evening and decided to expand the search. Additional resources were brought in. Officers from a neighboring precinct, volunteers, and sniffer dogs. The route the girls usually used was chosen first. This park and the adjacent trail were considered a safe area. Families with children, elderly couples, and joggers frequented it. Police began by interviewing witnesses. Those who had seen the girls that evening confirmed the time they left, but after 7:30 p.m., no one could say for sure where they had gone. A resident of a house near the park recalled hearing a woman's laughter around 8 p.m., but paid no attention. Another man reported noticing a dark car driving slowly along the side of the road next to the trail. This detail later caught the attention of investigators, but at the time, it was dismissed as a coincidence. The search teams divided the area. Some combed the paths and thickets near the park, while others checked empty buildings and abandoned garages. The girls' parents and loved ones were nearby, participating in all the activities. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Every bush, every shadow seemed suspicious. By lunchtime, it became clear the search was fruitless. Local authorities announced a call for volunteers from the community. Within hours, dozens of people, neighbors, teachers, and friends of the families had gathered in the central square. The first flyers with photographs of the girls were printed. They were posted at bus stops, outside stores, and in schools. The police set up a headquarters to field calls from the public. The flood of information was overwhelming. Many wanted to help. Some reported seeing similar girls in the neighboring area. Others claimed to have heard screams in the woods. Each report was checked, but none was confirmed. Particular attention was paid to Emily's phone. The last signal was detected near the park at approximately 7:40 p.m., after which the connection was lost. Attempts to pinpoint the exact location were unsuccessful, as network coverage in that part of the city was weak. Experts speculated that the phone was either switched off or destroyed. By the evening of the second day of the disappearance, the town was consumed by the news. Media outlets began spreading the information, and reporters descended on the search site. This came as a shock to the small community. Residents realized this wasn't just a case of missing teenagers, but a possible crime. Police stepped up security. Temporary checkpoints were set up around the park, streets were patrolled, and vehicles were checked. Parents were advised not to let their children out unaccompanied. Fear permeated homes, disrupting the normal routine. On the third day, specialized units joined the search. A helicopter surveyed the area from the air, and dog handlers worked on the ground. A combing chain of dozens of volunteers was organized, walking side by side, checking every meter of the forest belt. Despite this massive effort, no results were found. Meanwhile, the headquarters continued to process the information. Investigators compared witness statements and analyzed CCTV footage. One of the cameras outside the store did indeed capture a dark-colored car, similar to the one the resident had described. However, the license plates were illegible due to poor image quality. The girls' families gave interviews and appealed to the public, hoping someone would come forward with vital information. Their words echoed a desperate plea for their daughters to be returned alive. But investigators had increasingly less reason to hope for a successful outcome. By the end of the week, the search had become systematic. Federal agencies, including the FBI, were involved, indicating the seriousness of the situation. Investigators began to suspect a kidnapping or assault. Local residents waited in anticipation of news, and every new detail was perceived as a potential clue. But it was at this moment that the turning point came. On the fourth day, one of the volunteers, exploring a remote part of the park, stumbled upon a suspicious patch of ground. There were signs of a struggle in the grass, and nearby lay a pair of shoes belonging to Sarah. This discovery became a turning point, confirming their worst fears. The girls had been subjected to violence. Police headquarters immediately closed the area to the public. Forensic experts began their work. They recorded every detail, photographed traces, and collected possible evidence. The parents were notified of the discovery, although no definitive conclusions had yet been reached. The atmosphere in the city became tense. Everyone realized the search would no longer end well. On the fourth day after her disappearance, the search took its darkest turn. The area of the park where Sarah's shoes and signs of struggle were found was carefully cordoned off. Forensic experts and investigators arrived by morning. They worked methodically, documenting every detail, noting tire tracks and shoe prints, and collecting soil samples. However, the worst was yet to come. Around midday, one of the groups searching the coastal area of the forest came across the bodies. They were discovered by a canine handler and his dog, who had detected the scent of decomposition in dense bushes about 200 meters from the trail. The girls were lying nearby, their bodies covered with branches and dry leaves. Judging by the situation, the perpetrator had attempted to cover his tracks, but had done so hastily and carelessly. News of the discovery quickly spread throughout the volunteer camp and police headquarters. The area was immediately cordoned off, with no one allowed in except for specialists. The girls' parents were nearby and soon received confirmation of the worst. The missing girls had been found dead. The scene at the crime scene was grim. According to preliminary reports, the bodies bore numerous injuries consistent with violent death. Forensic experts documented wounds, signs of a struggle, and strangulation. It was immediately clear this was no accident or mishap, but a deliberate crime. The discovery of the bodies was a turning point. The missing persons case was now officially classified as a homicide. The investigation tightened its grip. The FBI and federal forensic experts arrived on the scene. Every piece of evidence was carefully collected and secured. Particular attention was paid to shoe prints and possible biological traces. The girls' bodies were sent to the morgue for autopsies. Experts were expected to determine the exact time and cause of death. Investigators hoped the results would help narrow the circle of suspects and confirm their theories about what happened in the park. The discovery sparked a furious reaction in the city. Media outlets surrounded the headquarters, seeking comment. Police issued a brief statement confirming the murder and promising to make every effort to find the perpetrator. Residents were advised to remain cautious and report any suspicious details. Sarah and Emily's families faced a difficult time. They were offered psychological help, but in the first hours after the news, they refused to communicate. The parents tried to stick together, but the pain of loss was palpable. The town rallied around them. Neighbors brought food and offered support, but no one found the words to say. An autopsy performed the following day confirmed that both girls had died the evening of their disappearance. Forensic experts determined that they had resisted their attacker, which explained the signs of a struggle at the scene. DNA evidence was found that could belong to the perpetrator. This was a significant breakthrough, giving investigators a chance to pinpoint a specific individual. Meanwhile, investigators were checking all reports of suspicious vehicles and people. They paid particular attention to a dark car spotted near the park. The owner of the car was soon identified and summoned for questioning. The man denied any involvement, claiming he was simply passing by. His alibi was verified, but no definitive conclusions were reached at that time. Patrols were stepped up in the city. This sent a clear signal to residents. The danger was real and the perpetrator remained at large. Parents tried to restrict their children's movements, and schools temporarily changed their schedules. The atmosphere of fear and mistrust grew. The discovery of the bodies changed the nature of the investigation. Now, they had not only a missing persons case, but also a proven double murder. The question was who committed the crime and why. Several theories were proposed, from a random attack by a serial killer to revenge or a conflict with someone they knew. From that moment on, the investigation became the center of national attention. Journalists from national television channels descended on the city, broadcasting reports daily. Every step of the investigation was discussed. Every leak of information provoked a storm of commentary. But for the police, one primary goal remained: to identify the killer as quickly as possible and prevent further victims. After the discovery of Sarah Miller and Emily Harris's bodies, the investigation entered its active phase. Time was running out. Every lost minute diminished the chances of finding the killer. The investigative team, including representatives from the local police and the FBI, began systematically gathering information. The first step was a detailed examination of the crime scene. Forensic experts collected soil samples, shoe prints, fingerprints, and biological material found on the girls' bodies. The presence of DNA not belonging to the victims was particularly important. This became a central element of the investigation. The database already contained profiles of people convicted of serious crimes, and the experts hoped for a match. Investigators put forward several theories. The first was the attack by a random assailant. This was supported by the fact that the girls were attacked in a deserted part of the park. The second theory was that the assailant knew the victims. The hasty attempts to conceal the bodies and the evidence of a struggle suggested that the attack had not been fully planned. People in the city began interviewing the girls' acquaintances. Friends and neighbors provided detailed accounts, describing their personalities, habits, and recent events in their lives. Sarah and Emily had no history of conflict or risky relationships. However, one friend reported that shortly before the tragedy, Emily complained of persistent attention from a customer at the cafe where she worked. The man frequently visited, asked personal questions, and left large tips. His identity was established. He was a local resident, 32-year-old David Collins. Collins was summoned for questioning. He denied any involvement in the murder, claiming he had been home that evening. His alibi was verified. Neighbors confirmed they had seen lights in his windows, but no one could say for sure whether he himself had been home. Collins had no criminal record, but his obsessive behavior alerted investigators. At the same time, a lead was being investigated regarding a dark car spotted near the park. Surveillance cameras captured a Chevrolet Impala. A database of similar car owners in the area listed more than 20 people. A background check was launched. One of the owners, a 45-year-old man named Richard Thompson, had a prior conviction for assault. He was immediately detained for questioning. Thompson's interrogation proved difficult. He denied being in the park, but couldn't explain where he had been that evening. His car was examined. Blood-stained stains were found on the floor mats, but initial tests showed it belonged to an animal. Despite this, Thompson remained under police surveillance. The investigation was proceeding uneventfully. Pressure from the public and the media was mounting. People were demanding the killer's name be revealed. Police set up a hotline for anonymous tips. In the first few days, over 100 tips were received. Some were rumors and speculation, but several pointed to suspicious individuals previously spotted in the park. One call particularly caught the eye. A woman reported seeing a man in the park on the day the girls disappeared, hiding in the bushes and watching passersby. She described him as thin, of medium height, and wearing dark clothing. This description later matched that of a local homeless man named Mark Henderson. Henderson was detained for questioning. His lifestyle was unstable. He spent nights in shelters, sometimes in abandoned houses. He had problems with alcohol and drugs. He acted nervously during questioning, but no direct evidence was found against him. His clothing and personal belongings were sent for examination. Autopsies on the bodies provided additional information. Forensic experts determined that the girls died approximately half an hour after the attack. Their bodies showed signs of restraint and strangulation, as well as fiber particles that did not match their clothing. This indicated that the attacker had come into close contact with them. The DNA database soon yielded its first result. Biological traces from the bodies matched the profile of a man previously arrested for sexual assault in a neighboring state. His name was Paul Jenkins. He had been paroled several months before the tragedy. Jenkins lived approximately 20 kilometers outside the city and owned a car matching the model captured on camera. This information proved crucial. His home was searched. Items of clothing with stains resembling blood were found, as well as a knife. Forensic experts began urgent tests. However, Jenkins denied his guilt, claiming the evidence had been fabricated. His lawyer claimed that the police were looking for an easy target due to public pressure. Meanwhile, critical reports appeared in the press about the investigation. Journalists pointed out contradictions. First, suspicion fell on Collins, then on Thompson, and now on Jenkins. The public began to doubt the police's competence. This hampered the investigation. Witnesses became less willing to cooperate, fearing publicity. Despite the pressure, investigators continued to gather evidence. Each suspect was examined on multiple fronts. Additional tests were ordered: fiber comparisons, DNA analysis, and verification of cell phone and camera data. The primary goal was to rule out coincidences and build a coherent chain of events. The investigation was gaining momentum. The city, previously calm, was in suspense. Some demanded a swift verdict, while others doubted the integrity of the investigation. But the police knew that without clear evidence, any charge would fall apart in court. Charges against Paul Jenkins were formally filed 3 weeks after the bodies were discovered. By this time, investigators had gathered a significant amount of evidence: DNA matches to materials seized at the crime scene, fiber traces from his clothing, and circumstantial evidence related to his movements on the day of the murders. Despite defense objections, prosecutors insisted that Jenkins was responsible for the deaths of Sarah Miller and Emily Harris. The trial generated enormous publicity. Not only city residents, but also reporters from national media flocked to the hearings. Additional public seating was installed in the courtroom, but access was difficult. The public demanded justice, and each new day of the hearings was covered in the news. The prosecution based its case on the results of forensic examinations. Experts confirmed that biological traces on the victims' bodies were a perfect match to Jenkins' DNA profile. Furthermore, a shoe found in his home matched the prints found at the crime scene. Particular attention was paid to a knife seized during the search. The blade contained traces of blood belonging to one of the girls. The defense, in turn, claimed that evidence could have been planted. Jenkins' lawyers claimed that the police were rushing to find a convenient defendant under pressure from public opinion and could have committed violations during evidence collection. They cited the initial arrests of other suspects, Collins and Thompson, and emphasized that the investigation changed direction several times. The court heard dozens of witnesses. The girls' relatives and friends recounted the final days before the tragedy, while Emily's colleagues mentioned her complaints about a persistent client. Residents who had seen a suspicious vehicle near the park were also called. Their testimony indirectly indicated that Jenkins' car was near the crime scene at the time. The key point was the analysis of Jenkins' cell phone. Location data showed that his device was indeed in the park area on the evening of July 14th, even though the defendant claimed to be at home. This fact significantly weakened his defense. The trial lasted for several weeks. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense. Sarah and Emily's families sat in the front rows, listening attentively to every word. Their eyes showed the heavy anticipation of the verdict. City residents viewed the hearings as an event that would restore a sense of justice and security. After the hearing concluded, the jury retired to consider its verdict. Deliberations lasted nearly 2 days. The verdict was delivered to a packed courtroom. Paul Jenkins was found guilty on all counts, including double murder and assault. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment without parole. The verdict was met with applause and tears in the courtroom. The victims' parents, although they understood that nothing would bring their daughters back, saw the decision as confirmation that justice had been served. After the verdict was announced, the city gradually began to return to normal life. The park where the murder occurred was temporarily closed, then landscaped and equipped with additional lighting and security cameras. Schools and colleges held safety training, and parents became more attentive to the whereabouts of their children. The case of Sarah and Emily left a deep mark. It became a symbol of how fragile security can be even in a small town where everyone knows everyone. For many residents, the trial served as a reminder of the need for vigilance and the importance of law enforcement. The murder of Sarah Miller and Emily Harris ended with Paul Jenkins being sentenced to life in prison. The case was a watershed for the city. Security regulations changed, surveillance in public spaces was tightened, but the crime itself remained part of its tragic history.